The history of heavy.
By song, genre by genre. Hello, and welcome to the History of Heavy podcast. It's been a couple of weeks. This is the show that traces the chronology of heavy music across genres, song by song. I am your quickly going insane co-host, Michael Huntsman. On the other end, that is Big Daddy Dave Lieberman in San Francisco, California. Hello, Dave.
Hi.
Lots of calamities tonight. We were
It's
off
been a
for...
very long week tonight.
It has, and stressful for no good reason. This is a silly podcast, and we just could not get I could not get my technical shit together, and then I fumbled the intro 25 times. But here we are. It is good to see you again. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. It's good to be here. It's nice to see you, and I'm so excited to talk about some Deep Purple.
Yeah, look, this is a kind of a big one. It's certainly a pivot point after 2 episodes talking about our dear lost friend Ozzy Osbourne and his band Black Sabbath. We are closing out 1970 tonight, sort of, to talk about Deep Purple, only to get back to Mr. Osbourne and his cohorts next week. We will get into that at the end of the show. But before we get into any of that business, Dave, I realized, I mentioned that I talk with my hands a lot. I realized that the last song episode we did, so our last couple of episodes, we talked about the last Sabbath show. We did the farewell to Ozzy. In between those, we had our penultimate 1970 song, Kingdom Come by Sir Lord Baltimore. However, as I hosted that show, I failed to... Actually, you hosted that show, so maybe that's why I forgot. We didn't do Song v Song in that episode.
Oh, my goodness.
So I wanted to get us back on track there. For new listeners, Song v Song is where we pit each of our personal champion song that has survived head to head against each song on this episode. The winner for each of us carries on to the subsequent episode. Dave's current champion is Dazed and Confused by Led Zeppelin. My current champion is Loose by the Stooges. Yeah. Of course, it's Loose. I got a very nice comment from a listener a week or so ago complimenting us on the fact that we talked about Loose and not a more obvious Stooges song. So hello, dear listener. Thank you for the comment. But those are our 2 champions, and let's revisit Sir Lord Baltimore's Kingdom Come. That was a song you selected, a song we both very much liked. We had a great conversation about it a couple of episodes ago. How does that song fare for you against Dazed and Confused, Dave?
We have a new winner.
Oh, I thought we might.
Yeah.
I thought we might.
Yeah, I love that song, and okay. I completely forgot about Song v Song. I'm so glad you reminded me, because that was like the big reveal. Was like, not only did I bring this song to the episode to the podcast, but I was eager to reveal that it was a new champion of mine. Really dig that song. Really dig that album, and it keeps coming up on Spotify. Like, that whole album keeps coming up in random Spotify things when I'm done with what I'm listening to, and it just goes wild. And I couldn't be happier. I'm like, oh, that's Sir Lord Baltimore again. Oh, there it is again.
That's
and I'll be
great.
Just rocking out like, yes, this is a good album, a good band, a good song.
They're in your algorithm.
That's right.
I love it. That's great.
How does Sir Lord Baltimore stack against the Stooges? Loose.
It's not going to get there, man. It's not going to get
All
there.
right.
The Stooges, I don't think are necessarily a band, as we discussed on the episode, that personifies necessarily heavy. I mean, they certainly are, um, but in the general context of I think of how heavy is perceived, I think Sir Lord Baltimore certainly fits that mold more kind of obviously. But that Stooges song is far too important to me, so it will live to fight another episode.
Yeah, um these don't have to make sense. They just have to
Right.
be authentic.
That they are. That they are. Okay, well, let's get into tonight's conversation, and we will do that by visiting your cultural corner, Dave, to see how you are going to help kind of wrap up the year 1970 for us.
All right. Well, let's start with a little recap of our song list for 1970 because it was epic and we've spent a long moment here. So, to remind everyone and bookend this year, we started with Black Sabbath, The Wizard. We moved on to the Stooges, Loose, Stray, All in Our Mind, Uriah Heep, Gypsy. Sorry, it's all in your mind. I have a typo there. Uriah Heep, Gypsy, Atomic Rooster, Death Walks Behind You, Sir Lord Baltimore with Kingdom Come, and tonight, Deep Purple's Bloodsucker. So, really epic songs, really strong bands. Some are new to me. Stray, Atomic Rooster are new to me. This Uriah Heep song was new to me. This Stooges song was new to me. I stumbled onto Sir Lord Baltimore accidentally. This Deep Purple song was new to me, but I'm familiar with Deep Purple.
I'm
But
very excited to hear. Well, I'll let you continue. I'm excited to hear your take on Deep
we'll get
Purple.
in. Yeah, we'll get into that in our discussion. Um, but as I've been doing with the Cultural Corner, talking about what's going on in the world, we hit a flat spot with 1970 on Wikipedia. So there's a whole lot of plane crashes and political upheaval that just is not relevant for this discussion because I just don't think it seeps into musical influence. So instead, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Deep Purple because it's worth talking about. They have a well, I'm just gonna go through the the list of all stars that have been a part of this band. Um, so, first of all, Deep Purple are an English rock band formed in London in 1968. They're considered to be among the pioneers of heavy metal and modern hard rock, although their musical style has varied throughout their career. Originally formed as a psychedelic rock and progressive rock band, they shifted to a heavier sound with their 1970 album, Deep Purple in Rock. That brings us here. Deep Purple have been referred to as part of the unholy trinity of British hard rock and heavy metal in the early to mid 70s, alongside Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. Listed in the 1975 Guinness Book of World Records as the globe's loudest band. Excuse me, I think Motorhead would like to have a word with you. But Guinness Book of World Records called them the globe's loudest band for a 1972 concert at London's Rainbow Theatre. They've sold over 100 million records worldwide. They've also generated several successful spin off bands, including Rainbow, Whitesnake, and Gillan. Deep Purple were founded by vocalist Rod Evans, guitarist Richie Blackmore, bassist Nick Simper, keyboardist John Lord, and drummer Ian Pace. The Mark I lineup came to an end in 1969 when Evans and Simper were dismissed from the band and replaced by Ian Gillan and Roger Glover, respectively, forming the classic Mark II lineup of Deep Purple. Under this lineup, the band recorded 4 studio albums: Deep Purple in Rock, which we're talking about tonight, Fireball in 1971, Machine Head 1972, and Who Do We Think We Are? Who Do We Think We Are 1973. That cemented their popularity and played a key role in shaping the emerging genres of hard rock and heavy metal. Gillan and Glover both left the band in 1973 and were replaced by David Coverdale of Whitesnake fame and Glenn Hughes. The Mark III lineup recorded 2 studio albums, Burn and Stormbringer, both in 1974, before Blackmore parted ways with the band in 75 due to musical differences. He was replaced by Tommy Bolin, though after just one studio album, the Mark IV lineup, Come Taste the Band in 1975, Deep Purple disbanded in July 1976, and Bolin died of a drug overdose 5 months later. In 1984, the Mark II lineup reunited, with several lineup changes ensuing over the following years that reads like an all-star of rock and roll, including Joe Lynn Turner on vocals, who was with Rainbow and Yngwie J. Malmsteen, Joe Satriani, who early in his career was a guitar instructor with such students as Steve Vai, Kirk Hammett of Metallica, Larry Lalonde of Primus, Charlie Hunter of the Charlie Hunter Trio, custom guitar player, he's amazing, and Alex Skolnick of Testament and other bands. Guitarist Steve Morse is the longest serving guitarist for Deep Purple. He's a 7-time Grammy nominee, was a member of the group Kansas in the mid 80s. Organist Donald Smith Airy has had a long and productive career, played with many other acts, including Gary Moore, Ozzy Osbourne, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, Jethro Tull, Whitesnake, Saxon, Michael Schenker, Brian May. He also worked with Andrew Lloyd Webber, who I'm not a big fan of, but that shows his range and talent. Absolute all-stars have been a part of Deep Purple. Deep Purple were ranked number 22 on VH1's Greatest Artists of Hard Rock program, and a poll on radio station Planet Rock ranked them 5th among the most influential bands ever. The band received the Legend Award at the 2008 World Music Awards, and they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2016. Deep Purple, ladies and gentlemen.
Deep Purple, ladies and gentlemen, they're a big one. So I'm glad we're taking a little bit of time to dig into them a bit. Thank you for that. Your summary of the band is a good indication of how we don't do any pre-production on this show, because I was essentially going to say what you just said um, about the history of the band. But I will add just this level of detail as we lead into the song we're going to talk about tonight. And that would be to pick it up specifically around their change of sound. That original lineup that you mentioned that featured Rod Evans on vocals and Nick Simper on bass was made the first 3 Deep Purple records: Shades of Deep Purple, The Book of Taliesin, and the self-titled Deep Purple record released in 1969. So they released those 3 albums in 1968 and 69. That sound was very successful in the United States. They had several singles chart, including Hush and Kentucky Woman, but they were almost entirely ignored in the UK. So in the summer of 69, specifically when Ritchie Blackmore hears the first Led Zeppelin album, he is inspired to change Deep Purple's sound to a much heavier, more kind of intense hard rock sound. And to accomplish that, he fires Evans and along with him bassist Simper and replaces them with the aforementioned Ian Gillan and Roger Glover. That is sort of what I always think of it as the classic lineup as you described, I guess Mach 2 technically, but really I think those 4 records that you mentioned, and specifically In Rock, Fireball, and Machine Head, are kind of the ones that people I think really think about when they think about the hard rock heavy version of Deep Purple. And certainly the 3 that kind of cement them as part of that holy trinity was Zeppelin and Sabbath that you mentioned. Tonight, we are talking about the song Bloodsucker, which you mentioned. It is track 2 from In Rock and was written shortly after Gillan and Glover joined the band. The album was recorded in several different studios across London, including Abbey Road, and the album was released on June 5th, 1970. The band's move to a louder, heavier sound did, in fact, prove to be fruitful in the UK because it became their breakthrough in Europe. The album peaked at number 4 in the United Kingdom, and it remained on the charts for over a year throughout 1970. Reviews of the album were equally positive, and its importance to heavy music was very well articulated by Canadian journalist Martin Popoff, who is a very well-known music journalist and actually an old friend of my pal Bob Nalbandian, rest in peace Bob, who I've mentioned on this show before. Mr. Popoff had this to say about Deep Purple, about this record in particular. Deep Purple's In Rock, along with Sabbath's Paranoid and Uriah Heep, all in 1970, outright and triple-handedly invented heavy metal. Notably, Ritchie Blackmore cites In Rock along with Machine Head as his two favorite all-time Deep Purple records. So kind of important to talk about tonight. And again, just sort of blows my mind that this record comes out also in 1970, along with a couple of Sabbath records that we will get into detail in some coming episodes. But tonight, Dave, I want to know what you think about Deep Purple. I have no idea how you feel about this band, and I can't really get my head around how I expect you to feel about this band. So what's your relationship with Deep Purple?
So my relationship with Deep Purple is a little bit peripheral. They've always been in my outer orbit. They're a Pluto of my orbit. They're there. I know they're there, but they're kind of in the distance. So I don't have a deep relationship with a lot of their music, but I have heard their music and I know their sound pretty well. And so, or I know this era of their sound. And I'm glad that you introduced the part about their changing sound, because that is a real important evolutionary part of this band. And because they've had so many different members, and because these members are all stars of their own in their own right, and went on to do front many other famous bands or be a part of other famous bands, they have this real amalgam of chemistry that happens. But it's this era, these four albums that we're talking about, this being the first one, that I'm familiar with that sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always appreciated the organ presence because it's a callback to our good friends Iron Butterfly. And, we talk about how there's these elements leading up to kind of this moment. We've talked about this several times this year in this year of our podcast. Uh, how there's elements of heavy in different bands, but this whole year we seem to be steeping in it and really spreading out. And so in a world where Iron Butterfly allows us to use the organ in a heavy song, a band like Deep Purple shows up and says, "Okay, I'm going to make a whole band with that." So I really appreciated that part of their sound. It added a really different element, I thought. And the way that they utilized that, I thought was very strategic. John Lord was a classically trained Hammond organist, so it shows. Uh, I never really got into them as a band, um, but the stuff that I've heard, I've always liked.
Yeah. Yeah, I would sort of say the same thing. I've talked about some of my older kind of hard rock and metal friends, and several of them worship at the altar of Deep Purple and swear by, Deep Purple is the greatest thing that ever happened to music. They have those kinds of fanatical fans, specifically kind of, you know, late 50s to late 60-year-olds that really love Deep Purple. All of the big songs, and you know what I think colored me about Deep Purple, no pun intended, was when I was sort of coming up in the 80s, when I was becoming really voracious about music, that version is a lot, it's not as heavy as this version. And because they've had so many lineup changes and kind of different sounds, I think they were too kind of overwhelming for me to dig into because there was
Hmm.
so much there.
Yeah.
the bigger kind of hard rock songs, Highway Star and Space Truckin' and Burn and all that stuff's great, and I've always loved it. But for whatever reason, I never dug in. And as I have, or whenever I have to any degree, it's fucking awesome. Like it's
Right, right.
all really well, no, it's not all really good. The good stuff is really good.
Yeah,
This record is really good. The record Machine Head is really good. The record Fireball is really good. But then a lot of their stuff for me is super spotty,
yeah.
and there's eras in their career that I don't like. Weirdly, or maybe not weirdly, but my favorite Deep Purple song is without question Hush, which is a
Huh.
totally different energy than
Totally different.
this
Yeah.
hard, but I love that song. But that's like a completely different band. And then they
Yeah.
become a completely different band again with Perfect Strangers and all that stuff. And so it was again too many bands for me to get my tiny little brain around.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
man, this stuff is great.
Yeah. Well, look, it's been what, 20 minutes. It's time we talk about Sabbath. Um, the way that I approach Deep Purple is a poppier version of the Sabbath era, the Sabbath sound that I like. Deep Purple has a lot of that heaviness that I find in Sabbath, but I find that they spin it a little more poppy, a little more commercial. It's much more approachable, and it just feels almost like Sabbath light sometimes. But if you're going to get Sabbath adjacent at all, you're fine. So
Right.
that isn't an insult. It's just a little bit of a compare and contrast because we need to benchmark it with Sabbath.
I'm glad you mentioned Sabbath. If you didn't, I was about to. The to me the way I would describe the difference between Sabbath and Purple, if or Black and Purple, if that's what we're doing,
Oh, there you go.
Deep and Sabbath, is Sabbath is much simpler than Deep Purple, but they don't sound simpler. They are like Sabbath is way easier to play than Deep Purple. Deep Purple's music is way busier and way more
Sure.
complicated, but that somehow makes it less interesting to me. Sabbath is the groove of Sabbath that we have talked all about, and this we're not going to turn this into another Black Sabbath episode, but the the way Iommi would write riffs that sounded big and important and ominous and heavy, though incredibly simple, sort of belies the way Richie Blackmore approached the guitar, which would become the kind of the Yngwie,
Yes,
approach, which was
virtuosity.
classically oriented, a
Yeah.
lot of notes, played really quickly, playing arpeggios, playing these crazy, um, almost orchestral scores on the guitar.
Sure.
John
Sure.
Lord is an insane, as you mentioned, an insane organ player. He's going nuts. Ian Pace is a great drummer. He's going nuts. Like they're all going nuts.
Yeah.
And the way Sabbath would go nuts was kind of more in a groove and in kind of this lockstep thing. And Purple's just busier in a
Mm.
way that I love busy music, but when you compare them to it's almost apples and oranges. Next to Black Sabbath, Deep Purple does not sound heavy. They don't.
I think that's fair. I think this album and this song certainly does sound
Well,
heavy.
it's heavy. It's heavy without question. I'm
Yeah,
I'm
it's
saying
just that next to Black
next
Sabbath,
to
it's a
Sabbath.
different band. I think that Sabbath
It's
has a
different
has
music.
a
Okay.
right. I think Sabbath has a less is more quality that you're
Yeah. Yeah.
grasping at,
Yeah.
where it's the four players at this elemental level and the way they play. It's the style that they play, not so much the notes that they play, and not so much the technical playing. Whereas this band has a lot of technical virtuosity. They're very good, talented musicians, and there's a lot of their music in these songs, and it makes for a different version of a heavy song.
Yeah. Yeah. How much does your, and I think this is one of the things I unfairly hold against the way their music sounds is that their image and the way they present is has always been a little like goofy and pretentious to me, and that's always kept me a little bit at arm's length.
Yeah, that's a. I mean, I feel that way specifically about Richie Blackmore,
For sure.
and have probably that has something to do with my distance with them as well. It's hard to get um, close to that kind of a persona, and let's face it, the band is a platform for his persona. So and so is Rainbow. And there's so much. I feel there's a lot of alignment between this era of Deep Purple and Rainbow, which is why I like Rainbow and why I like this era of Deep Purple. But I'm not a huge Rainbow fan for the same reason, right?
Hmm.
I like Rainbow as much for Dio as for anything else,
Right.
and maybe more for Dio. So yeah, that has something to do with it, perhaps in a way that Pearl Jam's um, aura shimmers. It's just off-putting somehow, and
Hmm.
so I can't say that I knew a ton about their presence, but I knew enough about Richie Blackmore to put a little bit of some air gap between us.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's always kept me at a distance, but it has always felt weird. We've talked about all of these. You rattled as you were going through just the year 1970 alone. From Sir Lord Baltimore to Atomic Rooster to Stray. We've talked about some more obscure, deeper cut kinds of artists. And I don't know that much more about Deep Purple than I know about those other bands, just because I haven't. It's definitely a blind spot for me, and but if I just go back to the music and listen to this song, Bloodsucker specifically, there is nothing not to like about it. It's great. Like, I really, really love it. But anytime I zoom out, it's like, well, it's Deep Purple, and that's a like I for whatever reason I could just never get close to this band.
Yeah, I took this as Deep Purple and rock versus Deep Purple, right? I was listening to this
Mm.
album versus this band, and that made it very easy for me to get some affection for it because the whole album is full of deep
It
cuts like
rips.
this.
It
They're
rips.
great.
Yeah,
They're
it
great.
rips.
So it was easier to get around when I took it that way because I didn't know this album. So it's like, oh, I'm listening to this album. And hearing this song in context with the others helped me frame it. It's not an outlier, it's the whole sound. So again, this is an example of where here we are in 1970 and we have arrived at heavy, and we have Black Sabbath's two albums and this album coming out in the same year. This album comes out in between Sabbath's two albums, and it just fits. It just makes sense. This is
Yeah.
now we had a spectrum of heavy music that was very broad. Now the spectrum of heavy music is much narrower. Now it's Sabbath to Deep Purple, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
We have
yeah, no, you're
honed in
right.
on what's heavy.
You're right. Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, because I think that is sort of the cloud that hangs over this show. That if I try to put the hashtag as an example on Instagram, history of heavy, it autofills to the history of heavy metal,
Right,
because heavy, when you say heavy music, the layperson or the person only into one style of music or whatever immediately thinks, Black Sabbath and in rock. Like, that's, and Led
yeah,
Zeppelin 4. Like, that's kind of
right, right.
kind of the genesis of what people think of heavy music, and not Ornette Coleman or John Coltrane or Alice Coltrane or Krautrock or the
Yeah, no,
Stooges.
they're thinking power chords, and
Right, right.
yeah,
And it
for
certainly
better or for
is,
worse.
but that's
Yeah.
not all it is. It,
Not a, that
in our opinions.
that's not all it is for us, and I think that's part of the point of this podcast is uh, we keep coming back to Sabbath as a benchmark and a way to help frame the conversation. But the fact is that part of that is that it's the stone in the pond, and there's all these ripples, and that's part of what we're trying to get at is the ripples. There's a lot that is heavy that isn't a power chord, and there's a lot of ways of doing power chords that isn't ominous doom, and there's a lot of different energy that can come, and there's different paces that we can apply and still find heaviness and
Right.
this thread that connects our conversation.
Yeah. No, really, really well said. What did you think of the album cover for In Rock?
um so to describe it, it's
Okay, go
the
ahead. Sorry.
band as Mount Rushmore,
How do yeah,
and I think that it's apt. It's definitely,
they're
it
from
feels a little,
London. How does that make any sense?
well, it's a little Spinal Tappy, right?
Very Spinal Tappy.
It just makes
There's a
sense in
lot of
that
Spinal Tap in Deep Purple.
yeah, it makes sense in that context. uh it is an American thing, and they're a British band, but it's it's hard rock, right? It's I don't know if that rock
It's so on the
formation
nose. Yeah.
is granite, but like you can't come up with a better metaphor for hard rock, heavy rock in rock. Uh,
I don't
it
know.
works really well, but it's such a cliche. And maybe it works because it's a cliche.
It seems like a Grand Funk Railroad album cover. It's like you're from London. You're specifically trying to break in the UK because you've only had success in the US so far, and you make your album cover an homage to Mount Rushmore.
Let's. I, I'm going to be generous and give them the benefit of the doubt. They're the talent on the band. They're not necessarily the art director,
Well,
right?
sure, sure. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, the record
So,
label might, but if even if you're the record label,
oh, come on.
all right, all
Record
right, all right.
labels, record labels don't even make any sense.
What did you think of this song specifically? Oh,
So
since you
this
listened to the
song,
whole, was it the right song to pick from this album?
I think that it was as right as two or three others.
Mm-hmm.
I liked this song, and so it was perfect. I did really like the kind of breakdown. That immediately was like, oh, this is a heavy song. This is a dark. It had a darkness to it because of that. So really like the song. It's easy to get into. It's catchy. It's it has heaviness. It has melody. Some of the stuff we've listened to has been melodyless. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to like get a foot tap in or have an earworm. But this song definitely is easy to do.
Yeah, I actually polled a friend about which I said, I'm doing this podcast. Give me some Deep Purple songs that you would consider heavy for us to listen to, and this was on the list. And as soon as I heard it, I'm like, oh man, this is a fucking jam. It we talk about the chugga chugga. It doesn't have like that palm muted chugga chugga that we would
Hmm.
come to know it in like Slayer and whatever. But it does have kind of a gallopy propulsion to it that I really
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love the vocal melody too. And Ian Gillan, I so dislike him on that Sabbath record, but man, he is great on these Deep Purple records.
It was a chemistry thing.
Yeah.
right? Like that Sabbath album, Born Again, is produced horribly, and
Yeah,
I
it's
think
not good.
that
The
doesn't do
lyrics are
his.
so bad. Yeah.
The lyrics are bad. It's just a weird period in the band, and so I think that there's a lot going wrong with that album, and it's not his fault, right? Meanwhile, this is um, a showcase for Ian Gillan. This is where Ian Gillan shines and what he's famous for.
Yeah.
And so this is what propels this is what gets him on that Sabbath album.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, no, what really well said. Interesting about Bloodsucker, we like to talk, or I like to talk about Spotify listens as a measure of popularity, and it's a really skewed metric, and it's just something
It's
kind of fun.
interesting though. It's
Yeah,
interesting
it's
to
fun
bring
to
it
talk
into the
about.
conversation. Yeah.
So on this record, Bloodsucker is the second to last least listened to song on the album.
Yeah.
Child in Time, which is a 10-minute song, has over 100 million listens.
Yeah.
The next closest song on the album has 3 million listens.
Yeah.
And Bloodsucker specifically only has about 136,000 listens, which
And
seem
like
like, how does that happen?
and 1,000 of those are me.
Right,
Um,
right, right. So it means that Child in Time must be on like a compilation or in a movie
yeah, it's got to be in
or
a movie or something.
yeah, I didn't do, but I mean, again, it's a 10-minute song, so for it to have that gap to be that wide is just absolutely
103
nuts.
million listens is. I feel like somebody's gaming the algorithm there.
So, and if we zoom out to across the Deep Purple catalog, the Child in Time is their fourth most streamed song. Perfect Strangers, which I mentioned earlier, which was from their 80s album of the same name, 148 million listens. Highway Star, massively popular, 246 million. And of course, Smoke on the Water, with a huge lead at 618 million. So that's pretty wild. But are you looking at Spotify right now?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Would if you haven't already looked, how many overall listeners do you think the band Deep Purple has on Spotify?
I have not looked. Overall listeners,
I'll give you
um,
Sabbath again just to jog your memory.
okay, thanks.
Sabbath has 31 million monthly listeners.
I'd say
That's
50
gone up
million.
a lot
All
since the
right,
last
fifth.
show.
Yeah, right.
That's gone
Yeah,
up a lot.
I'll say 50 million for Deep Purple.
Deep Purple has 7,348,000
Oh,
listeners.
really? See, I would think that they would have. Well, again, what was Sabbath before? Before July.
I don't know. I don't know. But what about Zeppelin? How many think Zeppelin? If Sabbath has 31 and Deep
Deep
Purple
Purple
has
has 7.
7,
20 million for
21
Zeppelin.
million.
Okay.
21 million. But they do Stairway to Heaven does have over a billion streams.
Yeah, that's in a
So it's
dozen
just
movies.
so I think it's interesting about Deep Purple, and that is, if I would
Hmm.
rank them, I'm sure record sales. Well, I don't know. I mean, Zeppelin from a record sale ultimate success is way beyond Sabbath or Deep Purple. Uh I wonder where they would be record sales wise, Sabbath versus Deep Purple, though. Um,
That'd be an interesting comparison.
I don't know, but I don't think that well, I'm positive the gap wouldn't be that wide. 31 million to 7 million. And the Spotify algorithm is weird because it does ebb and flow week to week, month to month, how many people are popping in. So it's by far a really great tool, but I do think it's interesting.
It is interesting, and it's fun to just compare it and contrast it in that lens because we have that data
Yeah.
to look at. Um, what was I going to say? Smoke on the Water is such an iconic song. that really puts Deep Purple on the map, I think, in a way that is almost an outlier because riff, Deep Purple's Smoke on the Water is much more like a Sabbath song. It's got a riff, it's got a grind to it, it's compact, it's heavy. A lot of what happens in Deep Purple is, again, it's got great musicality, but less of that signature one thing that song is built around. And
Well,
that was something that also occurred to me when we were listening to the Ozzy albums, um, for that Ozzy album episode that we did, was that it was great music, but it wasn't riff centered.
actually, that's a really interesting point in the context of this conversation because Randy Rhoads definitely comes from the Richie Blackmore school,
Yes,
not the Tony
yes,
Iommi school, and Smoke on the Water is definitely more Iommi esque than anything
right,
else I've ever heard in their catalog. And I would say the song, and certainly would be Sabbath. I mean, it's Paranoid. It's what Paranoid is to Black Sabbath. And if you look at the
totally.
listens, Paranoid's the only Sabbath song with more than a billion streams. It's double, more than double what their second song has, and just like Smoke on the Water is well beyond
Right.
their number two
Well,
track.
and how interesting that Paranoid is an outlier, I think, for Sabbath in that
Yeah,
it's not as heavy, it's much more poppy. Whereas Smoke on the Water is an outlier for Deep Purple, it's much more heavy and not as poppy. And both of those songs, the backstory on both each of those songs is that it was filler fodder. We
yeah.
need another 3 minutes to fill up an album. Ready, go. Oh, what are you playing there? All right, scribble some lyrics and boom, let's just record this. And then that's their biggest billion stream hit.
Well, it's the most common thing in record company history, right? Is the band records the album, A&R guy listens to the album, A&R guy says, "There's no single here. You guys need
Right.
to write a single." And that song is delivered to radio, and that becomes the albatross around the band's neck. It's Me, Myself, and I for De La Soul. It's the song they hate, but they have to wear it because it becomes the signature thing.
Right. Right.
What else on Bloodsucker? We haven't touched a lot about the song, and I don't have a lot more to say about it other than it rules. It's great. And I want to leave this conversation and this listening exercise by saying um, I'm going to have more Deep Purple in my diet, and I hope I do. But I think I'm going to continue. I have, because of course I do, a series of playlists called Muscle Cars and Panel Vans, and they are all just 1970s hard rock and acid rock and all the stuff a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. Everything from Foghat to Ted Nugent to Aerosmith to whatever. And there's a bunch of Deep Purple all over those playlists. And I think, songs like Bloodsucker and Child in Time and, some of these deeper
Speed
cuts, My
King.
Woman from Tokyo, are going to be spread out across these playlists. But I don't, as much as they were an album band and come from that era of album bands, I don't know. I don't know, even as much as I've enjoyed this listening, that I'll get them back into my diet because I just don't identify as a Deep Purple guy.
Well, I think that um, a little Deep Purple can be part of this nutritious playlist, and being in the muscle car and panel van contingency there is a perfect place for it to be. I feel like Deep Purple is better consumed in a playlist. I don't want to listen to an album of Deep Purple, but when this song comes on, it's great, and then it moves away from Deep Purple into something else that's in the same vein but
Yeah.
isn't Deep Purple. And so that helps me get more Deep Purple in my diet, if you will. So I agree. I think that that's probably how it's going to happen with me is it within playlists because there's great gems here, but I don't want to sit down to a whole meal of Deep Purple.
You're doing a much more articulate job tonight, or a much better job. That's a good example of articulating yourself tonight. I'll say it one more way, and then we can kind of get into wrapping it up here. You know, my wife Chaley and I were just having this conversation a couple of nights ago about the vibe in restaurants. You know, we're living in this little town for the summer and going to different places in town and whatever. And I will always choose the restaurant with the great vibe, even if the food is maybe not as good as the place with not any specific vibe, because I'm a vibes guy.
Yeah.
And as silly as that sounds in the context of music, the vibe of the band is really important to me. So I will only ever be able to get so far with as good as Deep Purple's music is, because I don't love their vibe. And that's just what it is.
This is the Rolling Stones argument for me. Like that's how you just articulated the Rolling Stones paradox that I live with. I just don't get into the vibe. And
Yeah.
it's not that it's bad. It's just that it's not an alignment for me and I don't connect with it. So, as they say in the employment world, it's just not a good fit.
It's just not a good fit. Well, I think that wraps it up. That was a really weird, disjointed Deep Purple episode. I'm glad we had the conversation. Anything else you wanted to hit on about Bloodsucker or the band before we
Yeah,
close
I
it
think
out?
just in conclusion, Deep Purple belongs in the pantheon of heavy, and it was important for us to bring it into this conversation. Despite our personal feelings about the band and our personal experience with the band, they belong in the conversation. I think Bloodsucker is a perfect example of why it's a worthy song, and people should listen to it.
Really well said. You know, talking about Sir Lord Baltimore, Atomic Rooster, whomever, even Uriah Heep. Those bands, we could argue whether or not they should be included. There is no question that we could not have this chronology without including Deep Purple. They are that significant to however you define heavy music.
Right. And I think that part of another reflection of that is just the staff. Everybody that was involved in this band
Yeah, the
is a
staff. Yeah.
is more than a somebody. They're a legend. This is an all-star band. It was kind of a proto supergroup because a lot of these people went off to be in supergroups. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was sort of this finishing school that would
Yeah.
move people on to. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, we're not going to miss Song Be Sung this week, Dave. So I think it's pretty clear based on how we talked about it. I'll just go first. I really, really like this song, and I'm glad we talked about it. And I really do, again, want to include more Deep Purple in my diet, but they don't. It's coming nowhere close loose for me. So the Stooges are going to move on to the next battle. What about for you?
I gained so much affection for Sir Lord Baltimore. I'm not done. I'm not done hugging him yet.
It's going to be interesting when we get to 1971 to see how deep into the 70s Sir Lord Baltimore will get. But we are not leaving the year 1970 just yet, Dave, because we have changed our approach a little. We have not talked enough about Black Sabbath, a band who released two albums, not one, but two albums in 1970. So we are going to take a 2-episode detour from our song by song chronicling of heavy music to stop at two full-length LPs of heavy music, both released in 1970, starting next week with the eponymous Black Sabbath, which is going to be like a 3-hour conversation, or not, because we've already said everything that we need to say about
You
Black
know what you
Sabbath.
can do actually is just go back to the whole podcast and cut all the Black Sabbath album discussion and make that the episode. It's a lot
Yeah,
of editing, but we've had that episode.
we have, and I look forward to having it again.
I can't wait.
That's next week. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you listening. We will be back on the rails next week, I promise. Stay heavy,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.